Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to imagine the year 1192. For over 500 years, the Rajputs and Chauhans ruled Delhi, a city that was absolutely flourishing with peace and immense wealth. But then, this foreign ruler named Muhammad Ghori sets his sights on this glittering prize. After a massive, decisive battle, he completely defeats Prithviraj Chauhan and fundamentally alters the course of Indian history forever. Today, we're unpacking a bloody 300-year saga of power, betrayal, and absolute conquest known as the Delhi Sultanate.
Okay, let's dive into this. Over 3 centuries, we're looking at more than 50 different rulers from various dynasties sitting on this very throne. Some were brilliant, some were totally mad, and a lot of them were utterly ruthless. Relatives literally slaughtered relatives just to wear the crown. But you know why? What was the magnetic pull of this one city that made a son gladly murder his own father? We're going to solve this historical mystery together today as we sift through the evidence.
To give you a quick mental map of this historical thriller, take a look at this timeline. We're going to investigate 5 distinct dynasties. We kick things off with the Mamluks, or slave kings, in 1206. Then we move right into the ruthless Khiljis in 1290, followed by the super long and honestly kind of chaotic Tughlaq era in 1320. From there, we see a rapid decline with the Sayyids in 1414, and finally the dramatic fall with the Lodis starting in 1451. All right, part 1, the Mamluk, slave kings, and a rise of Qutb Aibak. Aibak famously built the Qutb Minar, but his reign ended incredibly abruptly just 5 years later when he bizarrely died falling off a horse during a game of polo. So the real foundation of the Sultanate wasn't actually built by its first king, but by his son-in-law Iltutmish. Iltutmish made the absolutely crucial decision to officially shift the capital from Lahore directly to Delhi. He also set up this powerful council of 40 ministers known as the Chalisa to advise him, and rolled out the Ikta system to efficiently manage and pay his army. And this brilliantly illustrates his leadership, because get this, he also successfully defended India from the terrifying invasions of Genghis Khan. No small feat, right? Following Iltutmish, we get to a truly groundbreaking moment in history. The throne passed to Razia Sultana. She was the very first and literally the only female ruler of the Delhi throne. She stepped right into this fiercely patriarchal world and held her ground brilliantly. But tragically, the society and the elite at the time just couldn't handle a woman in power. Her brief but super impactful 4-year rule ended in 1240 when she was murdered in a conspiracy led by her own jealous brother. Fast forward a few decades, and the Mamluk dynasty falls into the hands of Ghiyasuddin Balban for 21 long years. Now, in stark contrast to Razia's constant struggle for acceptance, Balban ruled with an absolute iron fist. He didn't just think of himself as a king, he actually demanded to be called the shadow of God on earth. Wild, right? Balban completely dismantled that Chalisa council we just talked about, realizing they held way too much power. He set up a massive spy network and basically ruled entirely through fear, eliminating anyone who dared question him. Moving on to part 2, the ruthless Khilji dynasty. The Mamluks eventually fell to the Khiljis, which kicked off an era of violent ambition and family betrayal. This violent transition actually started when a weak Mamluk ruler was assassinated by Jalaluddin Khilji, who was then overthrown and murdered by his own ultra-ambitious nephew, Alauddin Khilji. Now, Alauddin is one of the most polarizing figures in this whole history. On one side of the spectrum, our sources detail a totally brutal conqueror. He led massive looting campaigns across India, forced mass religious conversions, and kept a staggering harem of 70,000 people. Yet, on the flip side, we see an incredibly sharp administrator. He rolled out brilliant market reforms, strictly controlled the prices of daily goods, and managed to successfully fight off massive Mongol invasions. During Alauddin's time, the sheer scale of military expansion and wealth extraction was just unprecedented. In 1308, his highly trusted general, Malik Kafur, led this massive campaign down south into Warangal. And it was during these fierce conquests that Malik Kafur actually looted the legendary, world-famous Kohinoor diamond, bringing unbelievable wealth back to the Delhi treasury. The Khiljis were expanding their power not just through governance, but through sheer economic domination and aggressive looting. But as you might expect, after Alauddin's death, the Khilji Empire rapidly spiraled into chaos, largely thanks to his son, Mubarak Shah. The historical anecdotes about this guy are just bizarre. Mubarak Shah was completely unfit to rule. He was a constant drunkard and famously wandered his royal court dressed in women's clothes, or often just completely naked. Obviously, his absolute lack of leadership and humiliating behavior thoroughly disgusted his military command. He was soon assassinated by his own general, Khusro Khan, which brought the mighty Khilji dynasty to a definitive and, frankly, embarrassing end. Which brings us to part 3, the Mad Tughlaq rulers. This is the longest ruling dynasty of the Sultanate, founded by Ghazi Malik, but they are remembered mostly for history's most confusing and eccentric king, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of Tughlaq's miscalculations. Let's walk through his most famous blunder. Step 1. He was absolutely terrified of Mongol attacks, so he ordered the entire population of Delhi to pack up and move 1,500 kilometers south to Dolatabad. Step 2. With Delhi completely empty and totally undefended, the Mongols almost easily captured the region. Step 3. Realizing he made a massive mistake, he ordered everyone to sprint all the way back to Delhi. The immense death toll and economic drain left this once rich empire in absolute poverty. And if you can believe it, it gets worse. Mohammed bin Tughlaq tried to fix his broken economy with another wild idea, a fake currency crisis. To save money, he replaced real gold and silver coins with cheap brass and copper ones. Well, because they were so simple to forge, basically everyone in the kingdom just started counterfeiting money in their own homes. The economy totally collapsed. When he finally died, a famous historian actually noted with relief that the Sultan was freed from his people and the people from the Sultan. So the Tughlaq Empire desperately needed stabilization, and they finally got it with Firuz Shah Tughlaq. He ruled for 37 years and fundamentally changed the government to focus on immense social welfare. Think of it kind of like an ancient social security system. He built the Dar-ul-Shifa, which provided free hospitals for the sick. He set up the Diwan-e-Khairat to arrange marriages for poor girls, the Diwan-e-Bandagan to create mass employment, and even established pensions for the elderly. He was a real builder of cities and a true restorer of order. But decades later, an absolute tragedy struck the Sultanate, one that it would never truly recover from. In 1398, the terrifying Central Asian conqueror Timur invaded. Because the leader Tughlaq rulers were incredibly weak, Timur faced almost no resistance. In just 5 days, Timur's forces massacred an estimated 200,000 people in Delhi. The sheer scale of destruction, looting, and enslavement left the city in absolute ruins. It literally took Delhi a full century to even begin recovering from this apocalyptic nightmare. Let's move to part 4 and see how this builds to the downfall. The Sayyid and Lodi dynasties. The grandeur is totally gone, replaced by weak leaders and constant rebellion. To really understand how far the Sultanate had fallen, just look at the Sayyid dynasty. This was arguably the weakest of all 5. At their lowest point, their entire empire was reduced to a radius of just 50 kilometers around Delhi. They had no real power, no real wealth, and virtually no military might. In fact, their final king, Alam Shah, was so terrified of conflict that he literally ran away from a fight and handed the entire throne over to the Lodis without a single drop of blood being spilled. And this brings us to the final dynasty, the Lodis, who were the first Afghan rulers of Delhi. Sikandar Lodi actually had some success, notably building the city of Agra. But his son, Ibrahim Lodi, total disaster. He ruled with extreme arrogance, paranoia, and cruelty, literally executing his own ministers on mere suspicion. His leadership was so incredibly toxic that his own uncle and his governor decided they'd had enough. In a fateful move, they actually sent an invitation to the ruler of Kabul, asking him to invade India and overthrow Ibrahim. Part 5. The Secret of Delhi. Now, before we reveal the explosive outcome of that fateful invitation, we have to pause and ask, why was all this incredible bloodshed centered strictly over one specific city? So the crucial point is this. Why Delhi? First, it was the ultimate commercial center. Ever since the days of the Rajputs, it was a super rich trading hub where all merchants flocked. Second, wealth generation. It was the exclusive center where all coins were minted, meaning whoever controlled Delhi's coin mints literally controlled the wealth of the entire empire. And third, strategically, sitting in Delhi allowed a ruler to act as a coordinating center to control all the surrounding states. If you held Delhi, you held the keys to the entire subcontinent. Which brings us to our grand finale. The man who received that invitation from the angry Lodi ministers was none other than Babur. In 1526, Babur arrived with modern cannons and brilliant tactics, facing off against Ibrahim Lodi at the legendary Battle of Panipat. Babur won, wiping the Delhi Sultanate off the map forever. But, this wasn't just an end. It was a massive beginning. The 300-year bloody throne was gone, but the foundations were laid for something even bigger. Are you ready for the Mughal Empire? We'll see you in the next explainer.